In 1994, Algeria was in a civil war with Islamic terrorists. In 1991, Islamic fundamentalists won the elections of Algeria. They hoped to restore Islamic religion across their nation, but however, the military regained power and locked up their leaders. 3 years later, Algeria was in chaos. Flying to Algeria was a huge risk, so much so even the airline asked the French Prime Minister to cancel these flights to Algeria. In this time, there was no response from the government. AIRFRANCE 8969 was an Airbus A330 carrying 224 passengers and 12 crew members. The plane took off from Paris and landed in Algeria. Their next flight was to return to Paris again. With their checklist complete and passengers boarded, they were set for departure. But a dramatic story was about to commence. The captain of the flight was Bernard Delem, co-pilot Jean-Paul Baudry, and Alain Bossut as the flight engineer. The co-pilot requests air traffic control for their pushback, and they were finally leaving. As ground crew were getting ready, 4 Algerian police boarded the plane for a passport inspection. It was annoying a little for the passengers, but they all complied and followed their instructions. This short delay was making the Algerian government suspicious. One of the passengers noticed a group of special forces unit rushing towards the plane. She asked what's happening. One of the police shouts out Taout, which stands for infidels, and so the police slowly revealed themselves. The police that boarded the plane revealed themselves to be the terrorists of the armed Islamic group, and they were taking over the flight. For the people on board, they were terrified and scared. The terrorists were armed with explosive and automatic rifles. News spreads quickly and reaches the French Prime Minister. He tries to plan things out with the Algerian government, but the Algerians would not let them solve this problem. Back in the cockpit, the terrorists put on the pilot's suit to distract any enemy snipers. The terrorists wanted to go to Paris to have a press conference, but the boarding stairs were pinning the plane down and the Algerian government blocked their runway.
When they first boarded the plane, they inspected the passports to identify if any of the passengers were Algerian police. The terrorists took one of the passengers and shot him out of reach. And after more threats sent to the government, they were still left ignored. As a result, they shot another man. He was a Vietnamese. All 4 of the terrorists were willing to do anything if it will get them to their demand.
The French Prime Minister begged the Algerians to let them solve this problem as it was an Air France plane, but they were still left ignored. Night falls, the plane was shining by the spotlights. For once in the hijacking, it was calm. The captain thought maybe it would be a good idea to start an assault now. 2 of the main terrorists were sleeping. The next morning, the French sent their special forces, the GIGN, to Marseille as it was close to the initial airport. The terrorists offered to release some of the passengers, but the passengers actually refused to get off as they were scared that they would be executed. The Algerians actually managed to identify the leader of the terrorists and brought his mother to try to weaken his son. But this plan backfires and the terrorists executed a French passenger this time. At this moment, the French Prime Minister threatens the Algerian that he was going to put that on international opinion. The Algerians had no choice but to give in. The plane took off for Paris. But it's here where things start to go wrong for the terrorists. The entire time they were pinned down at Algeria, the pilots were using the APU, or the auxiliary power unit, to power the plane. It uses 4 tons of fuel a day. So without enough fuel to reach Paris, the terrorists had no choice but to land at Marseille. The GIGN special forces were now 1 step ahead of them. As they refilled in Marseille, they were ready to head back to Paris. But now, the French got some terrifying information that the terrorists wanted to blow up the plane over the Eiffel Tower. So, they would not let the plane go, no matter the price. The terrorists were actually not as mad as they were in Algeria. Instead, they asked for a press conference on board the plane. The government let them have a press conference in the plane on one condition, that they had to clear the front of the plane. This was actually a clever plan to give a clear path to storm the plane. The plan works and the front of the plane was cleared. However, the GIGN Special Forces were not ready yet, and since there was no press conference in the first place, it threw the terrorists into a madness. They had to kill another passenger. However, they did something far worse. They opened fire at the air traffic control tower. After that outburst, the assault was about to commence. The assault plan was actually quite simple. 2 teams of 11 men each will storm the back of the plane to rescue the hostages, and a smaller team will penetrate the cockpit. Boarding stairs were assigned to move them into position, because what the terrorists did not know is that the doors of an A330 can be opened on the outside. After 20 minutes of gunfire, all 4 terrorists were successfully killed. No hostages were hurt during the assault. However, some of the GIGN members were critically injured. But there was no casualties during the assault, and the rescue was a success. A few months after the hijack, a member of the armed Islamic group actually confirmed their plan was to blow up the plane over the Eiffel Tower. The airports in France and Algeria was now improving their security to prevent this from happening again.
The French offered their security to other countries, but none of them bothered.
It was only after 9/11 happened where the rest of the world followed. The events of Air France 8969 was so deadly that most of the people on board that flight suffered PTSD and fear.
The captain was so scared, he had to cover his face from the public.